West Virginia Mountaineer fans, many of them at least, are calling for Ross Hodge to be fired or saying he's not qualified for the job or should have never been hired for the job. After only 12 games into the season, I'm asking folks to calm down, to relax. But in this episode, I'll go a step further. I'm going to break down and compare Ross Hodge's current season at West Virginia to other first-year head coaches at the Power 4 and or high major level so far this season. Let's do it. Let's do that breakdown. Let's take that deep dive right now. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner, your home for top shelf college sports news and analysis surrounding the West Virginia Mountaineers and the Big 12. To date, we're going to take Ross Hodge and West Virginia sit at 8-4. They have dropped 2 games to P4 opponents after holding double-digit leads in the second half. They have also dropped games to Xavier and to Wake Forest, where they did not play particularly well. And in the Xavier game, you can kind of throw, Xavier shot 65% from 3. Hard to beat anybody who shoots the ball that well. But that being said, they've dropped 4 games to P4 opponents. They have beaten one P4 opponent in Pitt, but let's face it, Pitt is a terrible basketball team right now. They have a losing record. That is not a signature win and will not help them much come March. So far, they don't have a win that'll help them come March. And there are a lot of fans out there already calling for Ross Hodge's job, which, in my opinion, is crazy talk. And I talked about it a little bit in my post-game show yesterday on Sunday. I'm recording this on Monday, December 15th. Talked about it a little bit on that show, but I'm going to go a step further and compare Ross Hodge's resume so far this season to other coaches who are also at their first year at new jobs. And you will see as we go through this, there's not much difference here. It goes to show you that it's hard for any coach to be highly successful, at least in the fans' eyes, what they see as successful, in year one of a program. And every coach on this list, with the exception of one that we're going to talk about, has a lot more coaching, or at least more coaching experience than Ross Hodge, and he's still performing. His team is still performing as good or better than most of these on this list. At least you could make that argument. And I wrote an article about this over at our website, wvsportschat.com. Go check it out over there. But when you take a look at this list, you have obviously Ross Hodge at West Virginia. They sit at 8-4. I mentioned the losses to Ohio State, Wake Forest, Xavier, and Clemson. Ohio State's an 8-2 team. Wake Forest is 8-3. Xavier's 8-3, and Clemson is 8-3. So all of those games were against quality opponents. Some are better than others, obviously, depending on their schedule, but we're not going to dive that far into it. But when you look at some of the other coaches on this list, let's start off with the one most of us West Virginia fans despise. Let's take a look at Darren DeVries. Leaves West Virginia after 1 year to go to Indiana. Indiana fans are already wanting him fired, which is also ludicrous, by the way. But nonetheless, they're 8-3 at Indiana, which that's underperforming at Indiana, especially when you look at the teams they've lost to, which include Minnesota, who, by the way, is also on this list in a minute, who's sitting at 5-5 on the year. They've lost to a Kentucky team who's not living up to expectation. They're 7-4, and they did lose to the 11th-ranked Louisville Cardinals, who are at 8-1. That's not a bad loss. Now, the big difference is Darren DeVries and Indiana have a couple quality wins on their resume. They beat Penn State 113-72, and they beat Kansas State out of the Big 12. You can argue whether that's a good win or not, but they beat Kansas State 86-69. But when you look at Darren DeVries and his head coaching experience compared to Ross Hodge, Darren DeVries was a head coach for 6 years at Drake, 1 year at West Virginia, and now is in his first year at Indiana. So he has, if you just count this as a season, full season, he has 8 years of head coaching experience at the D1 level at least a mid-major or higher. 6 years. Or 8 years, I'm sorry. 7 1/4 if you want to be technical, or 7 1/3, whatever. He has won 71% of his games during his career as a head coach. And oh, by the way, he also spent 17 years as an assistant coach at Creighton, another high major program out of the Big East. So Darren DeVries has a lot more head coaching experience than Ross Hodge, who has only been a head coach at the Division I level for 3 years now. He spent 2 years at North Texas and is in his first year at West Virginia. Before that, he was an assistant for 12 years at multiple schools at the mid-major level, and he spent 5 years as a head coach at the junior college level, where he won 86% of his games. He's won 66% of his games so far at the Division I level at North Texas and West Virginia. But you can see the difference in resume there. And even Darren DeVries is struggling and has lost games he should not be losing at Indiana with the resources they have. Now speaking of Minnesota, let's take a look at their coach, Niko Medved. He's in his first year there. They're sitting at 5-5 in the Big Ten. Minnesota is his alma mater, by the way. But not only are they 5-5, 2 of those losses are to mid-majors, Santa Clara and San Francisco, 2 teams that Minnesota should be beating. They do have a win over Indiana, 73-64, which is their biggest win of the year. But they are not having a good year under Niko Medved, who also happens to be a lot more experienced than Ross Hodge. Niko Medved has 4 years of head coaching experience at Furman, a year at Drake. He spent a year at Drake. Ironically, I think he was there before Darren DeVries took over. He spent 7 years at Colorado State, and now he is at Minnesota. Also spent 15 years as an assistant coach at the Division I level. 13 years of total head coaching experience, 15 as an assistant, has won 57% of his games as a head coach. He's 5-5 right now. So Ross Hodge is doing better, you could argue at least, than Niko Medved. Is that fair to say? All right, now, next one on the list, Buzz Williams. Now, you talk about somebody with experience. But right now, Buzz Williams is a head coach at Maryland. He's in year 1. Maryland actually scrimmaged West Virginia in a closed-door scrimmage earlier in the year. West Virginia thumped them in that scrimmage. Now, Maryland was down several key players. But nonetheless, Maryland's sitting right now in the Big Ten at 6-5 on the year. They have losses to a 7-3 Georgetown team, an 8-2 Iowa team, and have lost to 3 ranked teams, Michigan, Gonzaga, and Alabama, who are ranked 2nd, 8th, and 12th, respectively, right now in the country. But they haven't really beaten anybody with a pulse. And they're 6-5 overall. Yes, they played a tough schedule, but they haven't won any of those games that they could have beaten Georgetown, could have beaten Iowa, did not. Now, would you argue that you would rather be 8-4 in Ross Hodge or 6-5 at Maryland under Buzz Williams right now? Now, when you look at Buzz Williams' career, the guy has been a head coach at the D1 level for 19 years. He's coached at schools like New Orleans, Marquette, Virginia Tech, Texas A&M, and now Maryland. Has won a Big East championship during his time at Marquette, has been SEC Coach of the Year twice at Texas A&M, and has won 62% of his games at the D1 level. He also spent 13 years as an assistant coach at the D1 level. So again, you have a guy in Buzz Williams who was well known as one of the top coaches in the country, by me out there anyway, arguably. Has won everywhere he's been. He's 6-5 on the season in year 1 at Maryland. So Maryland, who's a team who's won national championships in the past decade, or at least, well, I don't know. Within the last few years, they've won it. I know it's been within the last 15 years anyway. They have won a national championship. Ross Hodge is arguably doing better than him in year 1. Let's go to Sean Miller from Texas. His first year at Texas after leaving Xavier. He's sitting at 7-4 right now for the Longhorns, with losses to Arizona State and 3 teams who are ranked in the top 25. Number 24 ranked Virginia, number 5 ranked UConn, and number 3 ranked Duke. Now, you could argue Texas has played a really tough schedule. That's why he's 7-4. That's fair. But the loss to Arizona State is a game Texas probably should have won. You could probably argue they should have beaten Virginia maybe. Their only signature win I would consider a good win is over NC State, 102-97. Ironically, they're all going to be on this list later as well. A lot of overlap on this list. They did defeat NC State, but only by 5 points. And NC State's a 7-4 team as well. So that is one decent win on their resume. So you could argue Sean Miller's having a slightly better year than Ross Hodge, but not that much better. And he's at Texas where they have almost unlimited resources. And he has 21 years of experience as a head coach at major programs. Arizona, Xavier, and Texas. Has won 71% of his games at those stops. And, oh, by the way, also has 9 years as an assistant at the D1 level. So even Sean Miller, who has a lot more experience, and including at the Power 4 level, is still 7-4. Another guy who's got Power 4 experience, Will Wade, NC State, 7-4. Losses to Texas that I just mentioned. They lost to a 10-1 Seton Hall team. That's not a bad loss. And they've lost to Kansas and Auburn, who are both ranked. So those are not terrible losses. But he's still 7-4, and they have not beaten anybody with a pulse. All of their wins are against teams they should have beaten, just like West Virginia for the most part. So would you argue that his 7-4 is better than Ross Hodge's 7-4? Maybe, because of the teams they've lost to. But again, this early in the season, we're grasping at straws with that. But he's still 7-4 nonetheless, with no signature wins. At least Ross Hodge has the Pitt win under his belt, which is big for us Mountaineer fans. Will Wade doesn't even have that. So, who's had the best first season? But even if you say Will Wade, okay, let's look at Will Wade's resume. 12 years as a head coach at the D1 level, several of those at major schools. He's won 70% of his games. He spent time as head coach at Chattanooga, Virginia Commonwealth, or VCU, as most of us know it as, LSU, and, of course, McNeese, most recently, and now he's at NC State. So that's Will Wade. Now let's go to Richard Pitino, who is now the coach at Xavier, the one who beat West Virginia a couple weeks ago. He's sitting at 8-3. I think they lost 3 out of a 4-game stretch there early in the year, and since then they've won like 5 in a row. So they're playing well right now. But they have losses to Georgia, who's 9-1, Iowa, who's 8-2, and they do have a loss though that's worse than any West Virginia has. They lost to Santa Clara. Now, they do have that 10-point win over West Virginia, and they do have a win over Cincinnati, who's also in the Big 12. But neither of those teams are, I would consider, really good teams. They're both okay. But they're decent wins. But he's 8-3. A loss to a Georgia team who they probably should have beaten, and an Iowa team who you could argue maybe they should have beaten. But, again, no really bad losses other than the Santa Clara loss. That's something that Ross Hodge doesn't have. Ross Hodge has not lost any games that he should have won, at least on paper, or at least that they were favored big over. So who's had the best season so far? You could argue either way, but nonetheless, either way you look at it, none of these coaches, even if you say their start to their career in year one has been slightly better than Ross Hodge's, none of them have been drastically better. You've got records of 8-4, 8-3, 5-5, 6-5, 7-4, 7-4, 8-3. We can grasp at straws and talk about whose losses are worse than others, whose wins are better or worse than others. But the long story short is you've got all these coaches. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to talk about Pitino's experience. He's been a head coach at the D1 level for 14 years at FIU, Minnesota, New Mexico, and now Xavier. So, again, all these coaches with all this experience, they're still struggling, or at least not meeting expectations in some cases in year one. But yet we have fans out there who want to fire Ross Hodge, who had to replace his entire roster. It's his first Power 4 coaching job. Rich Pitino has coached at the P4 level. Will Wade has coached at the P4 level. Sean Miller has coached at multiple schools at the P4 level. Buzz Williams, multiple schools at the P4 level. Niko Medved, P4 level. Darren DeVries has now coached at least 1 year at the P4 level. And Ross Hodge is doing as good, or at least almost as good as all of them at West Virginia. in his first year at the P4 level. And I know some people say, well, he was never qualified to begin with. He hasn't proven that yet either, that he's not qualified. He hasn't even gotten a full recruiting class of his own yet, which we should see the benefits of next season when players like Miles Sadler and Aliu Diem and Kingston Whitty are on the court. Give him time to build the program the way he wants to build it. It's too early to be talking about firing the guy. But anyway, I do have one more coach I want to talk about who is the exception to this rule, okay? And that is Ben McCollum at Iowa. He's in year 2 as a Division I coach already. He spent 1 year at Drake, replaced DeVries at Drake. Then he got hired on as the head coach at Iowa when Fran McCaffrey retired. Ben McCollum, who's an Iowa native, by the way, has Iowa sitting at 8-2 with both losses to top 10 teams, Iowa State and Michigan State, who are 4th and 9th, respectively. He has a win over Xavier, a win over Ole Miss, who has a winning record, I think. I think they're like 6-5 or something. And he does have a win over Maryland, who's also at 6-5. So, and Ben McCollum is only in year 2 as a Division I coach, again, in his first year as a Power 4 coach. He's the exception to the rule, though. And who knows? Once he gets deep into Big Ten play, how good will he do when he has to play Purdue and Indiana and others? So, again, to sit here and say that Ross Hodge is underperforming is bonkers. When you look at how other first-year coaches are doing around the country, the resumes are very, very, very close. And all of those coaches have more experience than he does at the D1 level. Every one of them, with the exception of Ben McCollum. And by the way, Ren Baker allegedly tried to hire Ben McCollum, but Ben wanted to stay home in Iowa. So can't hardly fault him for that. So to say that he should have hired Ben McCollum, indications are that he tried, didn't work out. I still think Ross Hodge is a good basketball coach. I think when you give him time to recruit the way he wants to recruit, attack the portal the way he wants to attack the portal now with more resources than he had when he came in. Same conversations we've had about Rich Rod in football. Give him more resources, and another year, I think we're going to like the results. And heck, this season's not even over. This team could turn a corner and start playing better basketball, which they're going to have to do in the Big 12 or they're going to get boat raced a lot. But that being said, there are still a lot of opportunities out there for this basketball team to impress us, to win get a signature win, to get a big lead against a team and hold it. All of that is still out there to do. But I just wanted to do this show to show you that being a first-year head coach at a program is not easy. And a lot of these teams I mentioned have a lot more resources than West Virginia, and their coaches are not doing much better, if at all. So stop with the fire Coach Hodge nonsense. For those of you who, I know it's the minority of you, but stop with that nonsense. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, look, if you disagree with me, I don't hate you, but we can have a friendly debate about it. But there is no way you can fire a coach this early in his tenure. You've got to give him time to build, especially when your program has went through 4 coaches in 4 years. You have to have some continuity, or it's going to be a never-ending cycle but they got to stop it. But anyway, let me know what you think about this comparison, to these other coaches that I put out there. I want to hear your thoughts. Hopefully it was useful. Let me know in the comments, was this a useful exercise to go through? I want to hear your thoughts. If you're watching this, whether you're watching this on Couz's Corner or over at the Hoops from the Hills channel, please make sure you like. Please make sure you subscribe to both of those channels. Please make sure you share it with your family and friends. Don't forget to check out our website, wvsportschat.com. I have articles up about this topic, among others. That site, by the way, was designed by the folks over at Appalachia Digital. You see their logo in the corner of the screen. Please go check them out if you want a new website or if you want to level up your current site, go check them out, appalachiadigital.com/Couz. Let them know I sent you. If you want to support me for free, you can do that by hitting the thumbs up button below. It's right below this video. You'll see a thumbs up and a thumbs down button on the left-hand side. Click the thumbs up, please. It really helps the algorithm. Also want to give a quick shout out to my paid VIP members of this episode. They are Brad Cheney, Jeremy Croy, Brandon Bailey, Roy Harrison, and Kevin Varney. Thank you all for your support. If you want to be a paid member and help me out financially and help me keep the lights on, there's a join button below as well. It'll either be white, red, or black. Click that button. It'll take you to the page and explain to you how to join and what the perks are for each level. It's either $4.99 a month or $2.99 a month. It comes right out of your checking account. Easy peasy. So go check that out. Want to thank you for watching the show. If you're listening on podcast, thank you for listening. Please leave a 5-star review and please follow us at your favorite audio podcast platform. Hope the rest of your day's top shelf. God bless you. And cue Country Roads.